Squad. Vanessa Contreras here, and I'm with Spar Bernstein's personal injury attorneys, Moshe, Borukh, and David Moreno, and they recently won a $75,000 case for a client who was in an awful bicycle accident. David, can you share the details on the case?
Yeah, absolutely. We had a client that used his bike as a means of transportation to ride from Queens County into Nassau County, which sounds like a lot, but really it was just a border town to another border town, so about a 20 to 30 minute bike ride. Unfortunately, in Long Island and in some parts of Queens, there are not as great bike lanes as there are in New York City, Manhattan, and Brooklyn. So while riding his bike to home from work one day, he got, as we learned in colloquial lingo, he got doored. Right? And unfortunately, the person that doored him happened to be a police officer. And not only was he a police officer, he was a Nassau County police officer. When the door struck him, the client was thrown into traffic while other cars were coming, and luckily was not hit by any of the other cars, but he was hit into oncoming traffic. He suffered several injuries, mostly to his lower back, his mid back, and his upper back, herniations, bulging discs. In the scope of personal injury cases, not the most serious injuries, but also not anything minimal either. So for us, in his case, Nassau County is an extremely difficult jurisdiction to deal with, and we're not dealing with an insurance company or a private company. We're dealing with the town, the city itself, and getting them to compensate someone for injuries is never easy. They want you to prove your case before they put any money on it. And this is very similar to another case that Moshe and I had the pleasure of talking to you all about recently, where throughout the process we were prepared, we had all of the medical records, we even had the video surveillance of the accident, and they refused to give us $1. So I got to say my favorite 5 words, and as a former prosecutor, as a former defense attorney, I can say it now without feeling guilty at all, which are: put 6 in the box. Let's go, right? If you're not gonna give us anything, then let's go.
Yeah. So in this case, you were suing Nassau County Police Department for damages?
Yes. One of the things in this case that was preventing us from settling it before trial was the fact that this cop had his sirens and his lights on, which means that he was involved in an emergency operation. That's the standard that they use when they have their sirens and lights on. But we were successfully able to preclude that from coming into the trial and even being mentioned in front of the jury, because we said all he was doing was giving a ticket to the person in front of him, although his sirens were on. There was actual video surveillance that showed the sirens on. But the issue was, by law, we argued that it wasn't an emergency operation. And the fact that we got that removed from trial, now the burden is not higher, right? Now the burden is just ordinary negligence. And if the police officer failed to look to his mirror to see somebody from behind him and then open the door, he's negligent as a matter of law.
Right.
And David Moreno tried the case, and he was successfully able to do that.
Is there a difference between suing the police department for damages rather than a company?
If a police officer is in pursuit, right, of a crime or something like that, and his sirens and his lights are on, then they're immune from any liability whatsoever.
Just
unless
like an ambulance or...
Correct. As opposed to a private commercial vehicle. If he blows the red light for any reason and he strikes somebody and hurts somebody, he's negligent.
So basically the law is this: if the police officer is not in an emergency capacity, all the same rules of the road apply to him the same way they would apply to anyone else. And the interesting thing about this case, and I think the reason why we were able to recover such a high amount for our client, is, unfortunately, this hurts me to say it as a former prosecutor, this cop literally made up his story and tried to create a narrative that fit what he was trying to allege. And what it boiled down to was that this cop decided on a summer day to harass a group of young African-American men. And he said that these men, not even men, boys, they were teenage boys, had apparently been throwing water bottles into the intersection, and that he received a call that these boys were throwing water bottles into the intersection. So he testified to that. So the simple questions we asked him was like, all right, cool. Did you recover any water bottles from the intersection? Were these boys carrying any water bottles? Then he said, no, they weren't water bottles, they were water balloons, right? So under oath, he changed his story several times. Then he proceeded to say that he spoke to the kids, they were nothing but perfect gentlemen, he was gonna let them go, but he wanted to check their IDs first, right? So he goes into his car, he's in his car, and at the same time, our client is riding his bike with the rules of the road, the way he's supposed to. He stops at a red light before he goes to the intersection, he's riding very carefully, he's an older gentleman, so he's not going fast. Then the cop wants to say, well, my partner was actually outside with this group of youths, which is a really, interesting term, for a police officer to say. My partner was out there by himself, so I didn't know what was going to happen, so I had to get to him quickly. So we pretty much caught him in the fact that, there was no emergency happening. These boys were actually going to be not even issued a ticket, and that he just wasn't looking, right? But instead of just saying, you know what, I screwed up, this was an accident, and frankly, if he did that, maybe this wouldn't turn out the way it did for our cop. But because he tried to make up a story and be an experienced trial attorneys, and Moshe's trying to give me credit, but the both of us, you know, really went in on this cop to the point where the judge urged the city to resolve this case with us.
One of the main reasons you need to undermine credibility on the stand on a witness is because it's exactly what he's talking about. First of all, he's a cop, right? People in Nassau County, they give more credibility to police officers just naturally. So
Right.
what Moreno did was he undermined this police officer's credibility so that the jury can see that this cop wasn't your average, you know, Nassau County police officer. This guy came to lie. And he did that because he wanted to avoid being responsible for the accident. And when he undermined the credibility, that's when the numbers started coming out during the trial. Because remember, before the trial, the offer was $0.
$0. Actually, even after the trial started, the offer was still $0. We have an injured client, and it's actually really important to know your audience, know your forum, right? Knowing the landscape of Nassau County, knowing some of the challenges that you go into. We don't handle cases where we're given a file and then we look at some papers and that's it. We go to the scene of the crime. We familiarize ourselves with the scene of the crime. We know, or crime or injury or whatever it is. We know that landscape. And also knowing that Nassau County can be pretty conservative, it's really paramount in jury selection to sift through those biases. Because I can tell you the first day we were in jury selection, when I asked the very, very simple question, are you more likely or less likely to believe somebody because they're a police officer? Overwhelmingly, they were saying that they were more likely to believe someone just because they were a police officer.
You have to get an entirely new panel
So I
as
got
a result of that.
3 panels in a row completely struck because they were so biased.
Wow.
So knowing that, right, and asking the correct questions, asking the tough questions, not being scared, and frankly, I don't care if we're on the show, not giving a damn. Because at the end of the day, we're there to zealously advocate for our client.
Yeah.
And I don't care if I offend you, doesn't matter. You're not the right person for our jury.
And with the result, I mean, all your hard work and your efforts were demonstrated in the case, $75,000 from $0. Another job well done. Thank you, Moshe, David, for sharing the case with me. And Brad Squad, for any personal injury cases, please contact us at 1-800-529-5465.
Thanks for watching. For more Brad Show Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.